Hey, I'm back. This is Chandler for Melda Production, and today I thought I'd go over the differences between the various limiters that Melda has. Really, there's only 3 of them, but somebody asked me to do this, so I thought I would, try to go over and explain it. So I have this track here. So I thought we'd use this, and let's just make it louder. Now, the 3 different limiters we have are MLimiterX, MLimiterMB, multiband, and MUltramaximizer. So let's first go over MLimiterX. This is the basic limiter. You see here there's 3 different devices we can use. However, if you really want to get in the nitty gritty, we can go into the edit screen and look inside here. I'll set this to default, and let's go over some of the controls quickly. We have the input, we have the ceiling. The ceiling is, the maximum value. I probably don't want it 0 because I don't want anything hitting 0. So I can just go in here and let's try negative 0.5 or 0.6, okay? So it doesn't actually get to 0, but it's pretty close. We have our threshold here, which if we move this down, it'll kind of make it louder. And we can also increase the input to make it louder too. So it's kind of like 2 ways to do that. We also have the attack release settings here. We have the peak hold settings, and we have the look ahead. So that way, just in case, some of that peak comes really fast, this will look ahead and it'll catch it for you. Below that, we have the saturation here, and this can be used to add a little bit of grit there, which sometimes is good. You might think why would you want that? But sometimes you do want a little bit of distortion there, especially if it's music that's supposed to be loud. So let's get into that. Let me turn this on and I'll start increasing the volume. Now, as you heard, as I move the input up, it gets louder. Also, if I move the threshold down, it gets louder. So that's 2 ways you can do it. While we're doing that, let's look over here. The R here is our gain reduction amount. So you can look at that and see how much gain is being reduced. Of course, you want to look at the output to make sure it's not clipping. You can see the maximum at the bottom there, which is negative 0.5 here, which is exactly what we have here. Sometimes you might notice if there's inner sample peaks, which I believe can sometimes go above this ceiling. If you notice that's happening, all you have to do is just go over here to the oversampling and just turn this up to 4 or 8, or you could go 128 if you want, but I don't know if you really need that. So that'll give you an idea of what you can do if you have intersample peaks, which I don't have here, staying right at that negative 0.5 dBs. We also have the width, so you can see if you're crushing the width too much and you're reducing it by limiting too much. And also one of the most important things here is your loudness units. So this will give you an idea of how loud things are approximately. And the great thing about this is, if you go down here where it says the numbers, just right click this, and now we have different settings. So now I have it at momentary loudness, but I could set it to integrated loudness like this. So if I play it now, so now I have an integrated loudness setting around 12.2. This is great if you have reference tracks to make sure yours is, in competition loudness-wise with other tracks. You can kind of boost this up. So this is really useful. There's other things here. Sometimes you can change the maximum value we already have there. And you have this loudness units gain reduction here. So you can see how much it's reducing things, I guess, psychoacoustically here. So you can adjust all those. Oh, I should show you the saturation too, shouldn't I? So let's play this and I'll move this from wet and dry so you can hear what it's doing. So this will give you a few more dBs if you feel like, just using a normal limiter, it's not so good. Maybe it's causing some sounds you don't like. You can try using the saturation in combination to get more sounds of it. And of course, you can adjust the threshold here, the amount in wet dry, and there's different modes here, which will offer different amounts of distortion or saturation. So there you go. That's MLimiterX. If you don't want to go through all this, of course, you have these here, which will kind of like take some of the controls away just so it's easier and faster. You can just crank that drive up and that's it. Let's move to the next one. Next one is MLimiterMB. As you would think, this is just a multi-band version of MLimiterX. So you have devices here. You can see here it has the different bands. And if we go into the edit screen here, you see it has these different bands here. If I go into, let's see, default here, it defaults with 3 bands. But if you right click here, you can insert more or change the number of bands here. Here it's limiting it using a crossover, which is like analog, which is, I guess, minimum phase, splitting these. But you can also do linear phase and a bunch of the other ones. Also, you can do panorama, which if you wanted to like limit the right side and left side separately, you could do that. I probably wouldn't want to do that, but it's possible if that's what you want. You can do the same thing with mid sides, so you could have the mids and the sides limited separately, which I probably wouldn't, but you could do that. So there you go. There's lots of different options here for creative things if that's what you want. But if you look in here, these have the same controls as MLimiterX, just you have multi-band here. This one has a saturation. This also has a ceiling, which is a little bit interesting. You can change the analog, which will add some other harmonics. I believe is it the odds or the evens that this one adds? I forget off the top of my head. But let's do this. I'll play it here, and let's look here at, see, we have manual mode, automatic gain compensation here if you wanted to like boost it up for you. And one thing you probably didn't see before is this temporary gain. What this is going to do is it's going to increase the input and then decrease the output by the same amount. That way you don't have to like increase this one and then decrease this one at the same time. This is just going to drive it without actually boosting the output too much. So let's play it. Let's boost it up a little bit just so we're getting some gain reduction going, which we can see here. It also has another meter for your saturation. Let's try it. So I moved up the temporary gain there, maybe a bit too much. So I'm doing lots of gain reduction. And the slope here is going to decide if it's more tilted towards the high end or low end there. So you can kind of use that. It's a bit subtle, but you get the idea. Especially here, as you saw here, I use this solo to play the different bands. You can also mute it by clicking this M button. And if you want to boost the overall volume of one over the other, you can click down here. You could even move it left and right, although I probably wouldn't want to do that, but it's possible. If you're doing something like, let's say an individual instrument instead of a whole mix, that might be useful. So there's lots of things we can actually do with this besides just going in here and adjusting the limiting settings. One thing I would say is like, why would I use this versus MLimiterX? This will most likely flatten out your spectrum a little bit. So if you think like, yeah, things aren't quite balanced, maybe the low end at points is getting too loud, but the rest of it sounds good, I might want to use this MLimiterMB to kind of balance things out. If you think, no, the mix sounds perfect as it is, I just want to boost it so it's louder, I would probably use MLimiterX. So MLimiterMB will change your tone for better or worse. MLimiterX will do less changing of your tone. So that's the difference. The last one I'll talk about is MUltramaximizer. And you're probably wondering, like, what is this? This is basically an easy version of MLimiterMB. Of course, it costs less too, so that's good. But if you want the multi-band settings, but you don't think like, I'm probably not going to go in there and like adjust each of the bands separately, just get this. It'll kind of do it for you, except, you don't have to go in there. If you don't need the other features like going in and adjusting the attack, release of all the different bands, this is good enough. So you see here we have the saturation settings. We don't have the other settings there. We just have the temporary gain, the input gain, and output gain. So let's do the same thing we did before. So you can see there it's doing a good amount of gain reductions, doing some uh, saturation as well. It has an input and output, and also actually, the crest factor here. So this will tell you exactly how much you're compressing, and it gives you like some color coding, I guess, here that will tell you if you're doing too much. So it actually looks like I'm kind of okay there. If you're hitting the red with this crest factor all the time, you're probably compressing things a bit too much and it might sound a little bit flat. So you're maybe going too far. And this will give you just an indication of, you're doing a good job or doing a bit too much. So that's the difference between these three. MLimiterX, I would probably use just in general. I think this is a good one to use. If I really need to balance my spectrum out, or I notice like the low end at some point just gets way too loud, well the rest of it's okay, or maybe it could be the mid range or upper end, etc. I'd probably use MLimiterMB, or if I just think like the spectrum's kind of out of balance and I want to make sure it's more balanced, I'd probably use this, change the tone. If I think like, I don't even know how to do all this stuff in here with all these different buttons, it's too much for me to wrap my head around, or I just want to like make something louder, faster, maybe a single instrument or something, or just maybe send this out to my friend really fast. I don't want to do a complete mastering job, but just give it a little demo. I might slap this on there and just crank the input until I get it a good loudness. So there's a lot you can do with all of these. I think all of them are good, but use them for slightly different things. Hope this gave you an idea of what they do. If you like this, give me a thumbs up. Leave any questions or comments down below and check out all the other plugins at meldaproduction.com. Till next time, see you.